We are now going to move into the theme of this panel, which is making the case for workplace charging. For today's employer experience panel, we'll be hearing from panelists from Milhouse, the City of Carmel, and Meyer. My name is Kelly Urich, and I'll be moderating this session for you today. So first, we will hear from Brad Vogelsmeyer, Vice President of Development at Milhouse, followed by Kevin Whited from the City of Carmel, and then finally, Christina Britton, Senior Sustainability Analyst at Meyer. Just a reminder that all attendees are in listen-only mode, and you can enter any questions into the chat box. I will also just mention that in the previous panel, we were having some issues with some of your messages and questions coming through the chat as encrypted. I believe I may have fixed that, but in the absence of that, you can also utilize the Q&A feature, which is along the bottom panel of the Zoom webinar to ask your questions and even insert your comments there. And then we will be holding your questions until the end after each panelist has had an opportunity to present. Okay, so we're gonna try a couple of polls, which were moderately successful last time. But here we go. I wanna get us in the theme of today's webinar. And here we go. All right, so the first question is, do you currently have EV charging stations installed at your organization? Okay, and I see we have about 25% having voted, but that could be the same technological error. So we'll roll with it, and I'm going to end this poll, and we can see that we've got about a 75 to 25% split between having and not having EV charging stations installed. Okay, all right. Well, there are the results for you all to see. And let's move on into our panelists for the day. So I'm going to now turn it over to Brad. So Brad, okay. You're welcome to unmute yourself and turn your camera on for us.
Awesome, thanks. As Kelly mentioned, I'm with Milhouse. We are a national apartment developer, builder, and operator. Headquartered in Indianapolis. We have an office downtown. Corporate employees, we have about 60 to 75 in our downtown location. What you're seeing on the screen is our cultural statement. And bikes are our allies, being part of that I've snipped out of there. That's definitely more metaphorical than literal. Mission for us is really to deliver a progressive housing product for residents, communities all across the U.S. And sustainability is definitely part and parcel with that. And with most of our work being urban core focused, inherently that means for us at least adapting a more sustainable transportation lifestyle. So walking, scootering, biking, and definitely EV. And so we wanted to make sure that we were offering what we were offering to our residents, and we were offering the same progressive lifestyle to our employees as well. And the product and the lifestyle that our residents were pushing for, that we were living that same thing on the corporate side. And so if you don't mind clicking to the next slide, just a simple demonstration. We've got about 7,500 apartment communities or apartments across the US, including a bunch in Indianapolis. And we had been rolling out electric vehicle charging within our properties since 2014, so maybe fairly early on the spectrum. We realized we had all these stations in our properties, but we didn't actually have anything in our corporate office. And I think that the wake-up call for us in actually installing EV at our office was we were starting to actually get residents to look elsewhere for an apartment, because EV charging wasn't an option. They had an electric vehicle, but they had no place to charge it overnight. And we're like, wow, if we're going to have residents be turned away by something like that same thing very well could happen on the employee side. And for us, it was a pretty simple sell. We were moving into a new office space in 2015, and we just made it part of our build out to make sure we had something included when we moved into the new office space. Parking was pretty limited for us anyway, being in a downtown location. And so with that being competitive for parking, obviously encouraging employees to either walk or bike to work if possible. But this was just an added perk for us as well to install it and have that be a dedicated space for employees that might want to or already own an electric vehicle, or we're looking at purchasing one as an added benefit to them coming into the office. So we pay for the electricity or pay for the charge. It's a great preferred kind of parking spot as well. Those aren't the only benefits. We have another kind of tangential relationship through our health and wellness program, which we can get into a little bit later, maybe during Q&A on how we make sure we promote that benefit to employees as well, outside of just having the charging station, because I think that as far as lessons learned for us, not just the install was a difficult piece, but more so the implementation, adoption, and just overall awareness of what that means, what the benefits are, not just the employee personally, but kind of larger, broader spectrum, what it means to have an electric vehicle from a sustainability practice perspective. So kind of jumbled on and on a little bit there, but one of the things I wanted to kind of leave with too on the takeaway side, I think for us, we've learned a lot over the process. Again, starting installed this in 2014 and now looking to today, technology has advanced significantly. Ease of access, understanding, there's a lot of different resources out there, and I'm sure some of the other panelists might jump into that as well. Sounds like a lot of folks from the poll already have this in their office. So I think the promotional piece, like I mentioned too, is a really big component of having folks be susceptible or accepting to more widespread adoption that you might otherwise consider. So just a little bit of background on our office, our practice as a small business, and what we're doing across our communities as well, and touch on a little bit more detail later on in the session.
Great, thank you, Brad. Yeah, I certainly look forward to the Q&A to kind of dig into the specifics of how the process went for you all and how that might compare to some of our other panelists that we've got. So moving right along, I'm going to invite Kevin Whited up for us from the city of Carmel.
Hi, so I'm going to touch on this in two different ways. One as an employer, and then two as a municipality trying to install EV chargers. So in my current role, I'm the Transportation Development Coordinator, and so all things electric fall under me. So electrifying our city fleet, which we're working on, and getting EV chargers installed around the city of Carmel. In my previous role, so let's just start with, so that's where I'm at, and that's where I come from. And so how about I'll go to the next slide, and then I'll kind of, so the reason I have the position I do at the city of Carmel is really leadership. As many of you know, Mayor Brainerd is pretty cutting edge when it comes to certain things. And so I just wanted to go through a couple of the reasons and his awards for that. The city was awarded first place in the Climate Protection Awards from the U.S. Conference of Mayors for its roundabout program. Also, Mayor Brainerd is serving as a trustee and co-chair on the Energy Independent and Climate Protection Task Force for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And the last one was in November of 2013. He was appointed to the Task Force on Climate Preparedness and Resilience by then President Barack Obama. So because of that, that's why they reached out to me. At that point in time, about 3 years ago, I was working at IU as a bike ped coordinator for the campus, but also electric vehicles fell under my wheelhouse too. So I started their electric vehicle program. So getting electric vehicles introduced into our fleet at IU, and then also getting EV chargers around campus. So, and that was interesting, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But so I was working at IU's campus, and I got a phone call from the surrogate for the mayor and asked if I'd be willing to come and work for the city of Carmel. And so as much as I liked working for IU, I thought the city of Carmel was doing some really good stuff. So we have leadership, we have good team members in the city of Carmel to get stuff done. And that's really important because when you're trying to get, for example, on city property things installed, sometimes with larger cities, Bloomington for that question. When you're trying to get stuff installed, sometimes, you know, if I'm working with the street department, in larger cities, it can be difficult. In the city of Carmel, it's pretty easy. It's a pretty small city. We have 100,000 people. And then we have good public partners in Carmel as well. And so the second thing for the city of Carmel, why it's important to get EV chargers installed around the city, is for economic development reasons. Being good to the environment can also be good for business. It also helps if constituents and consumers ask for that kind of stuff. And EV chargers at destinations like work and shopping can be that push, which you've already heard about if you were in the first panel discussion, to get EVs adopted. So, for example, in my case, I actually have an EV, and one of the reasons I have an EV is because I have charging. It's technically not at my workplace, but it's next door to my workplace. And it can drive business. So this is one of the things I pitch to businesses within Carmel to install EV chargers, is it can drive business to your location. Most people, we know 80% of charging is done at home, but it can help if you have locations, you know, when you're shopping, definitely where you work, if you can plug in and get your car charged. And also, you know, for businesses, it also can be a perk for your employees. So next slide, please. Which we kind of talked about. So in Carmel, I'll just show you that picture there. That picture is, we have a supercharger station at the Meyer in Carmel. It often is full or has cars in it. And then we have one other supercharger station that actually, or not a supercharger station, but a DC-FC station in Carmel, which is down right now, but hopefully soon, with the help of Duke, we'll get that back up and running. So next slide, please. So some of the roadblocks. So, you know, it's interesting. I was offered this position, and then in my first meeting, I was told I had no budget for installing EV chargers. So I had to be creative there, and I'm still being creative, trying to find money in other people's budgets that they're willing to give me, and then also public-private partnerships where possible. In fact, we just applied for a grant through IDEM and the VW Trust Fund to install chargers around the city of Carmel. So I partnered with our street department to install them, but then also private developers in the area to get them installed on their property. So it also helped that a lot of our garages were built with TIF funding, tax incremental finance funding. So we own the garages, are part owner of the garages for the first 25 years, but I don't have total say so. So I had to get permission from the developers before we could do anything. So what else? Getting approval through higher ups, red tape, things like that. So one of the things I found is, while the mayor is very pro EV, getting that message to him, right? Because there's layers of people above me that might not be that interested, or it's not that important to them. So it doesn't, I can push it, we'll see what happens. And it's not a really good idea to run around them and go to the mayor. So we're working on that. One of the other issues, for example, is who pays for electricity. So in my situation at IU, we had total control of the parking lots at IU. So we could put non-network charges in. They're a lot cheaper. If I wanted to know data, you can get data devices to plug into them, so which tells me like how many unique charges, how long the charges were, things like that. And because we couldn't give away electricity for free at IU because it's a quasi-governmental organization, which you need to look into the laws and that depending on where you work, we had to charge a little fee. So it was, I think, $6 extra a month. It might have been less than that, but somewhere around there. That just was rolled into the parking permit. in my case of the city of Carmel, the mayor was very adamant because it looks politically bad if you're paying for somebody else's fuel. So we have to get network chargers around the city. So let's see, what else? Oh, so next slide, please. So sometimes you have to think outside the box, and that's what I was getting at in that case. And so, working with developers, or in my case, the street department has electricians on staff. And so I can do a lot if they'll let me use their electricians to install chargers. So that, a charger roughly, is anywhere from, for a network charger, $2,000 or $3,000 to $10,000 for a level 2 charger. If I can get my street department to install it, that'll save us several $1,000s in the installation and the total cost of the EV charger. And then where I kind of talked about that leveraging business to cover some of the costs. So here's the big one, educating the public. So if I put all these EV chargers in, that's great. Some people will buy EVs and use them, but some people won't, right? So the one nice thing, because I have support of the mayor and a lot of people at the city, we, for example, had the biggest ride and drive event we've ever had, probably in the city of Carmel. Last year, we had 20 or 30 people show up with their vehicles, and then we had several hundred people stop in, look at cars. Some of them went on test drives, things like that. And we were planning an even bigger one this year, and then COVID happened. So some of the other ways I educate people is through our social media. I write articles in our e-newsletter, which goes out to 40,000 people or something like that. And then that's basically what we do to educate the public. And so I can also get stuff in our mailers because the city owns our water department, which is helpful. I do tabling events on occasion, though they're not my favorite because you can only impact a limited amount of people at those events. So, and just telling people like why EVs are better, how much money you can save, why they're different from normal vehicles. So that's really all I have on my presentation. If anybody has any questions, we can cover that in the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Kevin.
All right.
I really appreciate your storytelling. There's definitely a lot in there, and I look forward to unpacking some of those things.
Yeah, please.
Awesome. Okay. Well, then with that, let's move on to our final panelist, Christina Britton from Meyer.
Hey, everyone. So thanks for the introduction. You can move on to the next slide. So I will give a brief introduction to Meyer if you're not very familiar with the company. Talk about our EV charging offerings, some pros and cons of charging networks, because we have some experience there, and just general opportunities and challenges that we found when it comes to EV charging. I guess one step back, I can introduce myself. I'm a senior sustainability analyst, and I work on all aspects of sustainability, but I also lead our EV strategy. Next slide. So we've been in business in the retail space since 1934. We have 250 stores in 6 states, which you can see in the kind of background there. We have 6 distribution centers, 5 manufacturing facilities, some pharmacy build facilities, and over 70,000 team members. Next slide. So EV charging is part of our commitment to sustainability, and we approach sustainability in a very purpose-based way, and it ties into our mission to enrich the lives and communities that we serve. And so these are kind of the 4 pillars of our environmental commitment. And so EV charging relates to the carbon footprint intensity reduction and the responsible growth pillars of our environmental commitment. And over on the right, this is Fred Meyer, who led our company for many, many years, son of Hendrik Meyer, who started the company. And this picture was from 1990, and one of our first campaigns around being earth friendly, kind of a predecessor to the word sustainability even being used. Next slide. Next one. So I think everyone on this call is probably pretty familiar with the environmental benefits of EV charging, but kind of part of that enabling carbon reduction, it helps enable EV adoption. We know that EVs have lower lifetime emissions compared to internal combustion engines, and especially as the grid becomes cleaner. I think we all, understand this aspect, but we also love the aspect that we're helping to improve air quality in the communities that we serve by enabling vehicles that have zero tailpipe emissions. Next slide. So this is our current, all the dots on this map show where our EV chargers are. We currently have 1 stores with vehicle chargers. We have chargers at our 2 corporate offices in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then 1 at a distribution center for employees. So most of my experience is around EV chargers at our stores. Have ones that are our corporate offices as well. Happy to answer questions about any of them. We are, Kevin highlighted the Superchargers at the Carmel store. You can see 35 stores with Tesla Superchargers. That's mainly the type of charger we have been offering, but we've been expanding at a pretty rapid pace, non-Tesla chargers, both level 2s and DC fast chargers at our Meijer stores. This year we added 9 stores, which is the most in one. We are, really looking to ramp up in the future so that we can be a part of the transition. Next slide. So looking at charging networks, just wanted to introduce this into the conversation. We network all of our store EV chargers and our corporate, really workplace chargers and are not networked. So just based on my experience, wanted to share some of the pros and cons there. The pros of a charging network are the data, right? It's knowing who's using them, how often, how long, just being able to have visibility into that and to control some of that. Station maintenance, if you have network chargers, I would argue that you can get some faster response and really understand the root cause of the issues if you're having some sort of electrification issues or issues with the chargers themselves. And then control, you can restrict access if you want it to only be employees so that people aren't abusing it. You can limit charging time at crowded locations, to make people kind of move along after an hour or 2 or however long you want that to be. So as you can see, there are some real pros to the charging networks. The con is the cost. An unnetworked charger is pretty simple, as you probably know. You could do one for less than $1,000, but pretty easily. For the charger itself, the network chargers, more expensive chargers themselves, as well as the ongoing service costs or the ongoing software costs. And then the 2 logos there, ChargePoint and Greenlawn, works that I have familiarity and experience with. And I believe are really 2 of the largest, at least in the Midwest area that we're in. Next slide. And then lastly, challenges and opportunities. Just a few factors here to consider. Infrastructure would be a pretty big challenge, at least for us. Questions like if you have sufficient electrical capacity. If not, that's going to be some costs to upgrade your electrical, whether it's bringing in a new service or, just upgrading a panel. How far you have to run the conduit. That's one of the biggest variables for us, since we're putting them out in the parking lot of a store, having to run the conduit and bore from our electrical room in the store all the way out to the location where we're installing the charger. So as close as you can get it to the source of the electricity is going to save you costs. If you're networking your stations, one of the things that I never thought of until it came up is how strong the cellular service is, because most networks use a cell service. It's not a hardwired line. So if you don't have great cell service, there's not too much you can do about that. You can use some boosters, but something to consider. Ongoing maintenance, just thinking through how you're going to handle charger issues and how important reliability is. If you feel that it's important for them to have 100% uptime or 99% uptime, something to think about of what is that reaction going to be if they go down, and how quickly can you get them serviced. Some of the opportunities on the financial side, I mentioned this, but there's government grants available, and the VW grants in a lot of states have been and are currently available. Utilities have started to release a lot of rebate programs. We've taken advantage of quite a few of those in Michigan and Ohio. None in of currently, but also utility partnerships, whether it may not be a full grant, but often utilities are excited for new EV chargers to be installed for good reason, more electricity there. But there might be an opportunity for a better rate or, things like that you're not aware of. So reaching out to your utilities can uncover some opportunities. And then reputational, I think we're all aware of these, but positive PR and employee satisfaction. And as I've mentioned before, enabling the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and improving air quality. And I think that's the last slide. So happy to answer questions as we get into the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Christina. So I'm going to invite all of the panelists to now join us by turning your video on. And I also am going to just stop sharing my screen for a minute and then pull up a list of questions, pre-prepared questions. But in the meantime, I noticed there was one comment in the chat that came through as encrypted. I'm not sure what is going on there. It could be some functionality problem that's created through the Whova platform. I'm not sure. But if you could please drop your questions and in comments as well into the Q&A feature, we'll be sure to get those answered. Another option would be if you wanted to raise your hand as an attendee in the participants list, we could then allow you to speak and ask your question that way. But in the absence of questions, I will, I see one, there's one now. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so first question is from Tim. What's been the most common method for users to install EV chargers? Purchasing online and installing themselves, contracting with someone, etc. And I will, any of you are able to jump in and respond if you'd like.
I'll jump in real quick on the small business side. We have the benefit, since we are a general contractor, of having a lot of different electricians or electrical contractors that we work with. But honestly, for us here, working with an electrician, it was kind of a soup to nuts process. As the technology advanced, they understand from the power company side, or even the different rebate options, like working them start to finish, understanding what your electrical load capacity is all the way through installation. And then you have an ongoing maintenance partner as well. That was probably the easiest for us, is just hiring an electrician to take us through the process.
That's the approach that we've taken as well. We don't have internal construction folks, so hiring an electrical contractor. And that there are out there organizations that would kind of turnkey, give you the solution, the chargers, do the design, do the install, and make it as easy as possible. Obviously, there'd be some added costs to that. But yeah, we've always just contracted with an electrician.
Yeah, and I kind of already discussed that in mine. Since I have my street department to be able to do that with electricians, that's, and in all honesty, we haven't installed any yet. We've just been trying to figure out which chargers we're going to use, and then the VW grant came up, so that paused any installations until we could see if we get grant money, and if not, then we'll keep working on it. By the way, if IDEM's listening, we need that grant money.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Kevin, I believe you've already answered this one, but my question is actually about the installation process and timeline. So can you all speak to how long that process has taken your organizations? And are there certain steps in the schedule that businesses should be thinking about and planning extra time for? My mind goes directly to, the permitting process, you know, potentially, being closer to the governing body that administers those permits might have its advantages, in your case, Kevin, but I'm curious from the other panelists as well.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Permitting can be an issue. We've installed chargers at a lot of different locations across the Midwest now, and some have been a couple-day review and issue an electrical permit, and some have taken months because the municipality just really doesn't have any experience with EV charging, it seems like. So since this is relatively new, I guess it's understandable that there's a little bit of lack of experience, and hopefully that goes away as we move forward and more organizations install EV charging. So permitting can be an issue. The other big time delay has been if you need to bring in a new service. So working with the utility, if they need to transformer and electrical service, in my experience, that can take quite a while. And if there needs to be any easements and things like that, and involving other parties. So if you're just installing, you have the electrical capacity, permitting would probably be the bigger, the only issue there that could hold up a timeline. But in general, it's not a huge project.
Well, only other point I'd add to that, I agree with everything Christina said, is on the location of those chargers. You could see probably from the photo that I had at our office, it's a wall mounted right on the office building. Our parking lot happens to be right there. So we're not running additional conduit. We're not having to rip up asphalt or interrupt current parking flow. So that's just a consideration too. If you've got ongoing operations and you have folks parking somewhere and you're trying to put in a new station that's maybe not super convenient to where your power is located, that's just something else logistically to think through, and probably from a cost perspective too. She mentioned in her presentation about having to run that additional conduit to that pedestal mounted charger or whatever.
Yeah, if I could add too, I have two stories at IU. I thought it'd be really easy. We had a building that was a LEED certified, was it platinum, whatever the highest is, and it had conduit running out to the parking lot already. So I'm like, you know what? That's my low hanging fruit. I'm going for it. And it took me almost a year because I had to work with the electricians. And there, at IU, we didn't have to worry about permitting per se. So because on campus, but it was just running it through these different, like, for example, I got an email from the transportation committee for the building, which I didn't even know existed. So I had to do a presentation to them. So there's that little stuff. But now that first one went in, apparently I was just talking to the people at IU, and I think they're getting ready to install another 8 or 10 chargers. And that didn't take very long at all, since now the process has been established. And then with the city of Carmel, when I first started, the U.S. Tennis Association emailed me, or I can't remember exactly how I got the email that said they wanted to put chargers in the parking lot. Well, I don't know anything about permitting. It was right when I started too. So I said, oh, just go to the permitting office. And then he emailed me back and goes, I'm not going to do it. They told me I had to do X, Y, and Z, which I thought was absurd. So then I reached in got involved in the process, and there's just mistakes. Again, back to that thing that Christina said, they hadn't done too many of them. So when he went to permitting, they assumed it was going to be a much bigger deal, and it was going to, so they, I don't remember exactly how it worked, but he was going to have to get some major permitting something going on. So now that I'm involved in the process and know what it is, I've been trying to work with the permitting group to streamline it for people. You know, obviously level 2s are pretty much the same. It's when you start getting the DCFC chargers that it gets to be a much bigger deal. So I just wanted to throw that out. Be patient with people. Once they figure out the process, it usually will go not smooth the second, third, fourth time.
Great point, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, I'm personally managing a few EV charging station installations myself, and patience is what I say to myself when I wake up every morning. But I would just add, especially now with COVID, plan even more time for those types of things. And then I'll just also echo the comment in the chat, thanks Carrie, that we will be digging into a lot of these questions around permitting tomorrow during one of the sessions. So if that is something that excites you or concerns you or otherwise, come back and join us tomorrow for that session. All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions from the audience. That is quite all right. So let's see. I believe you all already answered this one, but if you want to expand on it, I'd love to hear that again. Can you speak to your organization's main reason for installing workplace charging? And I guess as a sort of a complementary question to that, are there other organizational initiatives that complement this work?
I can go ahead and reiterate. So for us, a lot of it was being an urban-focused residential builder. A lot of it was about sustainability and just the progressiveness of the communities we're building, and wanting to see the same thing for our company and our employees, and being a downtown office that promotes a whole bunch of different means of transportation. This seemed like a natural fit for us. And offering our employees the same thing we were offering our residents. Outside of other engagement around this or other initiatives around this, part of what we were doing as well, now defunct Blue Indy program, but it was a great opportunity for us for someone that didn't have an electric vehicle and didn't necessarily know what it meant, similar to the ride and drive events that were mentioned. I mean, we'd offered heavily subsidized memberships so people could get exposure before actually buying a vehicle themselves, which is a great kind of informational tool to get folks out there. We had stations right outside our office as a matter of happenstance too. So it was a great way to kind of part and parcel look at how we expand just the organizational knowledge of what it means to adopt EV as part of your everyday lifestyle.
And I'm really sorry. I was actually, there's a Q&A. I don't know if you saw that there was a question in the Q&A, and I was reading that when you asked your question, but we can cover that other Q&A.
Yes,
so
I can repeat the question, and we can certainly circle back to that one about safety. It was just a question of, kind of restating and reiterating your organization's reasons for installing charging and how it aligns with other efforts.
So ours is sustainability, pretty much. And then again, right now, because I have to take things piecemeal, I'm really just working as a municipality with trying to get chargers out in the public. My next step actually is to try to get chargers into our fleet and then chargers in for our parking lot for our employees. So I'll let you know when that happens.
I can speak, reiterate some of the points that I've made around sustainability for sure, helping to reduce emissions from transportation, our scope 3 emissions as a company, not our direct emissions, but, trying to do what we can to reduce transportation emissions, improving air quality. And as a retail, separate from our corporate offices, as a retailer, hoping that EV drivers would like to come to Meijer rather than someone, they maybe stay a little bit longer. They're more loyal. They're, just love the Meijer brand even more. So I think that there's quite a few benefits to us as a retailer with EV charging. I can't speak to the non-network chargers at our offices as much because I was before my time and not a part of that decision-making process. But, I know that part of it is to have that amenity to our team members so that they, are even happier to work for Meijer and come into the office.
Great, thank you. Okay, so a question in the Q&A. Are there any known safety issues, particularly with DC fast charging stations related to fires, electrocutions, or otherwise that might add liability to owners?
I don't know of a history of that. I'm just thinking of liability since I haven't done any DCFC yet. But yeah, historically, I've not heard of any. I mean, you are pushing a lot of electricity through those things. I know that's one of the fears, right? I mean, years ago, there were some issues with some cables. They didn't catch on fire, but they got really hot and started to get, the plastic started to get soft. But I think they fixed that. It was with Electrify America chargers. So Christina might know more about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we consider them to be pretty safe. The chargers that we buy go through very rigorous testing and, other testing bodies to ensure that they are safe. Thus far, we've mostly installed 50 kW chargers, so relatively low power DC fast chargers. But as we look towards the future and we're getting to, 100, 200 above, we are, we similar to what you see at like Tesla superchargers or Electrify America superchargers, they have an enclosure that has the power units, and the charger is just the dispenser. So having that kind of controlled in one place that's unlocked kind of separates the users from the high powered, where the highest power is. And so I think that's another part of ensuring safety. And we also, one other piece with our DC fast chargers, we do preventative maintenance. So they're on a PM schedule to ensure that they're functioning, everything is, filters are replaced and things are replaced on a regular schedule to ensure that they're continuing to be safe.
Thanks. And that also will be touched on tomorrow, that topic. Thank you, Carrie. So I want to circle back to a topic that's related to the question about why you're doing this. Because I'm curious if any of you have experienced from your employees or maybe in your case, Christina, from your customers, a demand or request to put in charging and how you've managed that. And if not, in the absence of that, I'm curious, Kevin and Brad, you touched on this a little bit too, but the engagement after the fact around, doing ride and drive events and making employees and the general public aware that these charging stations exist. Can you speak more to what other things you've done to engage with people, whether it's implementing protocols or best practices around how to use them to ensure that they're equitably accessible?
I can take that to start. So a few things we do. I mentioned the kind of quasi relationship, or we're subsidizing memberships with the on the other EV charging side of things to help engage employees, but if they didn't even know what it meant to drive an EV vehicle. But two really simple things we did as well. One, it's an onboarding tool for us. So awareness, understanding that it's there, it's a perk. We pay for the charge. It's not on the employee. So if they do have an electric vehicle, it's got a preferred location right next to our entrance. So when you start, that's an available tool. The other thing too, I'm sure a lot of companies have like health and wellness programs, like reimbursement programs. For certain things, you get a capped amount quarterly for different activities. Like for example, if I go get my bike tuned up, I could turn in that receipt and get a health and wellness reimbursement. It's like, if we're offering that for those various uses or for gym memberships, why can't we do the same thing around EV? And because that amount is capped, there's really limited opportunity for abuse, but it's just another way if someone's thinking about that investment or ongoing investment. It's another opportunity for them to have their employer partially subsidize some of the cost Again, it's a very nominal amount, but it's just another pretty simple way. We didn't have to create a new program for it. It was just kind of buckling on to an existing program that we already had in place.
I could speak to that too. I think kind of two questions there. Do we, see demand in customers or team members asking for EV charging? And absolutely, I've been amazed at the social media engagement of EV drivers. Like, oh my goodness, they are a passionate group of folks, and it's awesome. We're installing right now some chargers in Muskegon, Michigan, and we haven't released anything publicly, and it's in conjunction with the utility Consumers Energy, and they keep, there's these people taking pictures and, all these rumors, oh, it's got to be DC fast chargers, it's right next to the Tesla Superchargers, can someone confirm this is exciting? It's really cool to see. And I also, a little bit of a tangent, but I see why they're so passionate. I kind of back to the point of ride and drive people in EVs. I actually drove my first electric vehicle last week, which I know it's been a little long since I've been managing this program. But I drove the electric Mini Cooper, and man, I want that car so bad, but I have a 1-year-old, like I have a family, there's no way I can drive a 2-door car. But it just makes me so much more excited for the other EVs coming to the market, and some that are already in the market, but just trying to figure out how soon I can buy an electric vehicle. So I feel very strongly that in terms of engagement, if you get people into an EV and explain some of the charging, and especially if you have workplace charging, they'll want to, whether they can afford it or whether it's the right time for them to purchase a brand new car, that's another matter, but get people engaged. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I've already kind of talked about what we do, but it's funny, when I was doing that IDEM grant, of course you brainstorm and try to think of more exciting things to do, but I thought maybe I'll do it regardless, but if we get that grant and we install EV chargers, I thought about doing ribbon cutting ceremonies for each charger that we do, and do a press release and media release, because that just educates people more and more. We're big on media releases in Carmel, so if you live in Carmel or anywhere close, you probably have gotten one of our media releases. We write them for absolutely everything. That was one of the things. And then I was thinking about doing quarterly articles. So I've said I've written articles before, but like doing quarterly articles for our newsletter that talks about, believe it or not, I don't find it confusing at all, the charge, the like level 2 chargers, the port, like J1772 plugs. But a lot of people are really confused by that. Like, is it a fast charger plug? Is it a J772 plug? Is it CCS? Is it CHAdeMO? And why is it different from Tesla? And believe it or not, I think that shuts people emotionally down. It shouldn't really in the whole scheme of things, because you either buy a Tesla that has that or you buy another car. But for some reason it does. So I was going to start writing articles like that to clarify things. Now, if anybody reads them, that's a whole other story, but at least I did it.
I love that idea, Kevin. You're absolutely right. There's still a lot of unknowns and skepticism around EVs. And I think, like you said, Christina, just having that experience goes so much further. I mean, I can speak personally. I never considered myself a car person or a person who likes to drive, but when we got our electric vehicle, we have a Model 3, about 1.5 years ago, I just, like, it flipped the switch for me. Like, there's so much fun to drive. It's nuts. But yeah, the experience goes a long way. And I think part of that experience includes breaking down those barriers around, like, well, what does charging look like? And learning that it's really not that challenging once you learn it. You learn it once and then you're good to go. So okay, well, we are running toward the end of our time. I do have one more video I want to show, but maybe as a final question, I would love to ask you all, if you had one piece of advice to give potential businesses or workplaces around the idea of workplace charging, what would it be?
Just do it. No, I think that, Brad especially spoke to how inexpensive it can be if you have the right situation and the configuration of where you can put EV chargers, et cetera. The very minimum, it's worth exploring, seeing if you can just get a couple ground or operational, and see what feedback and what you learn from that, and whether it makes sense to add. I think for all types of employers, it makes sense to at least explore and try to understand whether it can make sense.
I would add, just don't be afraid of the process, because it's becoming more commonplace. There's a lot more people that know a lot about the technology, how it works, and so don't feel like you have to carry that burden. I mentioned there's dozens of reputable contractors or electricians that can help kind of from start to finish. So I wouldn't be afraid to engage one or two, have them lay out the process and estimated cost and timeline for you to compare against each other, and use that as a decision-making tool. Don't feel like you have to jump in from day one. I think that would probably be my biggest advice.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. The process can be daunting, and I'm a cog in the wheel of that process, and it's still daunting for me. Does that make sense? It's just keep those calls going, the emails, and yeah. Ironically, what's slowing me down right now is we want to determine which charger to use across the city from now on. So right now we have some charge points that are very old that aren't supported. And then we have an old General Electric, so they don't even exist anymore, the GE Electric or EVSE part of the company, which, by the way, I saw those Eatons too, right? The Eatons aren't supported any longer, are they? No. So that's the kind of stuff you get stranded assets. And so we're trying to avoid that. And so I have a list of 10 EVSE companies. I had to put together a white paper, and I'll submit this week to the mayor, and he gets to choose which EVSE we're going to use. So that was a little bit of a process, because there's really good companies out there. So you just have to figure out who you think is going to last, and then go with them. So that's all I have.
Understanding that all equipment has an end of life, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wasn't worried about the equipment so much as the company. So it's kind of like the charge points, for example, are not supported any longer. It's not a big deal. Charge point said, hey, we'll do a charge up. We'll do a trade up for you. It's the General Electric but since it's still working, I'm not stressed out about the General Electric. So, when it stops working, hopefully by then we'll have a company picked out. My idea was actually to go with 2 or 3 different companies. You've seen cities do that. Which which company works out best after a 3-year time period, and then go with them. But I was voted down for that.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your experience and your vast knowledge in this space. I am going to show one more video, and this is a video that's more central to workplace charging. And then I'll jump back and send us all off for the rest of today and then tomorrow's agenda. So bear with me just a moment. Share.
Lauren Julian. I am the Director of Guest Services here at the Indianapolis Zoo. Here at the Indianapolis Zoo, we do have charging stations that are free for myself, employees, and the guests. It was a huge incentive, yeah. It was really nice to have the charger here, to know that I would be charging at work. I think they're becoming more affordable, and people are wanting to go that direction, especially as you talk to more people that have electric cars, and you get excited about how much you can get on the charge without paying for gas. part of my position here also as guest services, I did help kind of start the green team here at the zoo. You know, I don't want to go ahead and drive around a big old car that's kind of producing tons of emissions and gas. So I do want to help not just with promoting green stuff out on the zoo grounds as well, but also at home life too. It is our mission. I think it's extremely important, you know, be as green as we can. The other day I was walking to my car and a little kid and a mom was walking by and she's like, look, you know, she charges her car and that's how she gets home. And I was like, well, that was awesome because that's exactly what you want to practice. Not only, you know, is it good for the employees and the guests, but people driving through, they'll stop to charge here and then come into the zoo as well. So, which is a huge perk. The more charging stations that we do have throughout Indy, it does make an impact on the community throughout. It's showing that Indy itself cares, that they are trying to make an impact on being environmentally smart as well, and they want others to practice it too. I hope the more people see that there's convenience for electric charging, the more that they're going to want to buy that car as well.
Okay, so hopefully you all are now seeing this last slide here. So just quickly, I want to thank you all for joining us today on this first day of our workshop. There's a lot more coming up tomorrow. As you can see, I've got it, the agenda there, and you'll be joining those sessions just like you did today. But in the meantime, between now and then, I encourage you all to visit the exhibitor hall. And I will drop the link into the chat. Let me see if I can find it. To get you back to the web portal for the workshop. And there you'll be able to see all of the wonderful exhibitors that we have as part of the workshop. Many of them have scheduled times where you can go and actually interact with them live. But others have some video content loaded. Many of them also have special deals and coupon codes that are part of this workshop. So I encourage you to check out all the exhibitors and see what is available. And with that, I just want to say thank you once more to everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists, Kevin, Brad, and Christina. And we will see all of you tomorrow morning at 9:15.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.